The Evergreen Show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant. With your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Sean.
Well, good day, everybody. It's another fine Monday here for the Evergreen Show. We are back. I don't know what episode this is. We are well into the 30s here. This is Noah Fleming with my co-host today, Mr. Sean Veltman, brain surgeon of Calgary. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, though I'm a little worried I'm going to start getting knocks on my door from various medical authorities.
Well, listen, we had a lot of feedback again from last week's topic where we talked about internal benchmarking. We talked about the story of Happy or Not, the fine little buttons for measuring customer satisfaction. And we had a lot of questions. We had a lot of people, reach out to us and say, listen, this is something I've never really thought of before, at least in those terms. I've never really heard the concept of internal benchmarking used. I've never really considered it that way. Obviously, we're always looking for areas to improve and looking for things we can do better. But, can you talk a little bit more about that? That was sort of the general theme of the responses we got. So, Sean, I think you had a great idea. Let's share some actual case studies, some actual specifics of work we've done with others in this area that they can, again, take this back to your own company. Think about it, because here's the shameless plug here. If you're not going to call us, if you're not going to work with us and, reach out one-on-one and talk to us about this, then you do need to come up with these ideas on your own, which is great. And we want to help you do that. We want to help you develop those. So I think that's my shameless plug, Sean. But let's actually give our listeners some great value here and share with them some specific stories of things we've done with others. Does that work for you?
That works for me, absolutely.
Was that too shameless, Sean?
No, you said you don't have to call us. You can do it on your own, but it'll work better if you call us. That's as far from shameless as I can get. I'll get shameless near the end.
It always works better if you call us up and say, hey, come help us do this. But if you don't want to take that route, the podcast, The Evergreen Show, is here for you, and the challenges and everything we give you today will help you do that. So, Sean, let's dive in.
All right. So in the last episode, one of the things that I mentioned was, there's being just such a push in technology that makes it so easy these days to get started with internal benchmarking over so many areas. And I want to talk about one that would have sounded like science fiction even 5 years ago. It's something that we've helped companies do, very small companies actually, and it's had a huge impact. So one of the things that we put into place was call center voice-to-text monitoring. And I'll explain a little bit by what I mean about that. So we were working with a company, and we helped them identify that there were some higher-performing salespeople. And in fact, they were generating about 3 times as much gross profit per hour on the phone. I think I mentioned this one in the last episode. So what we did was, first we figured out who was who. Then we worked with a very friendly company and developed a way to take all of the recordings of every call they did, and we were able to actually pull out what are the differences between the high-performing and the low-performing people in terms of number of sales questions asked, in terms of how closely they were following the language that they were trained to use. And what we found, unsurprisingly, is that the people who asked more sales questions got more sales. The people who followed the language as trained did better. So there's no surprises there. What was really interesting and really useful is that because we had automated all this, because there was some really cool software running in the background, we were able to monitor every single call, right? So instead of having a sales manager or a call center manager listening in to 3% of the calls and hoping to catch patterns, we could get a report on every single call and say, oh, over this day, this person asked on average 6 sales questions per call, and this person asked 3. And lo and behold, the person with 6 had about double the profit of the person with 3. So that told us 2 things. Either we had to train the person who was asking for 3 on how to ask more, or we had to fire them, right? And it quickly became apparent who would respond to training and who needed to go. This is something that gave us 100% coverage into the activity that everybody was doing, 100% coverage into whether or not they were doing the job that they were expected to do, how well they were doing it, and exactly where they needed training. It's, frankly, it still amazes me. And we were able to do this for a company that was doing just about $50 million a year in revenue.
So that's a great story. It reminds me in a great case study and a great example of how to use this. It reminds me of a story I've told before, but it was with a $1 billion publicly traded company I was working with that played the recordings at their conference of them secret shopping themselves. And so calling themselves up and saying, oh, by the way, Sean, I'm just curious, do you guys offer X? And 90% of the time, the response was being given incorrectly. And so there were all these laughs at the conference. Everybody thought it was hilarious. And I went up to the CEO after and said, frankly, I'd be shaking in my boots if that was the case, because that was what you recorded over a 2-week period. How much revenue has been lost over the past 6 months? And this was an example of somewhere where we actually specifically recommended that exact same intervention, that we could track this for them. We could automate this for them. We could actually put a number on how much revenue was being lost just by putting this tool into place in the background. And then most importantly, probably really quickly, we could fix it. And, they didn't take us up on that, which to me, I thought was a huge mistake. I won't, we'll just leave it at that. I think they missed a great opportunity there. And I'm sure if we called them again, we'd find they're still losing money just by answering the wrong questions. But again, a perfect example in the case study that you shared of an example of where you can benchmark and how you can use this to improve through this simple tool. But again, just asking the question, right, of what is the sentiment of the language, and then how can we capture that and use that to get better? So fantastic stuff. Anything else you want to add to that case study?
Nothing I want to add to that one other than, again, we're in an age of almost magic technology. And so, we get the ability to do this so easily and so inexpensively that I know there's a lot of companies who wouldn't even think that they could put stuff like this into place because they're too small, or because, they're trying to get other areas sorted. And I just have to reiterate, this stuff is getting so much easier, so much faster, so much less expensive. It would be millions and tens of millions of dollars to get systems in place 5 years ago that we can now get set up for $250,000, $500,000, and really start to be getting complete visibility into every area of sales, of call centers, of marketing. And that's for companies that are doing 50, 100, 200 million. For smaller companies, there's other interventions that can be done for basically pennies on what it used to be. And so if you're not thinking about it, if you're thinking it's too expensive, get in touch. We can find internal benchmarking solutions for you and point you in the right direction, because you need to be using this stuff.
That's funny. I thought when you said that, oh, well, you can easily do this now for 250 to 500,000. I instantly heard half the listeners of the Evergreen show hang up and never want to tune back in again, because they were like, what? That's cheap? But you saved yourself there, Sean. You came back and you said, we can do this for pennies on the dollars. And I think what you've shown is that, and what we've shown is that this can be done in very, very small companies. We use internal benchmarking in $5, $10 million companies, $1 to $2 million small businesses. Again, like you said, all of this stuff can be put together rather affordably these days with the types of tools that are available. It's just a matter of having a little ingenuity, thinking of where you want to track, what you can track, how you can get better. Is there any other case studies you want to share?
There is one, and it's something that I'm actually quite excited about, because it's something that you and I worked on a little bit into late last year. And that is the product we built for a small quick service food company. So they wanted to know why there was such a discrepancy in their upsells, right? So think of, would you like a large fry with that instead of a regular? Or would you like fries with that? Or can we get you a dessert?
Yes.
And so, you and I went in and we did the initial internal benchmarking and found that some restaurants had a huge percentage of these upsells and others didn't. And even within single restaurants, it changed over time based on who was working, who wasn't working, who was the manager, etc. And so one of the things that we immediately did is identified which individual employees were the best at creating these upsells. And then we put in a solution that helped identify exactly how they were doing this. So we had the two steps. First, identifying who's doing well, and then being able to identify how they were doing it. And we used actually similar technology to that which we used with the call center, where we were able to actually analyze every single drive-through interaction and categorize it based on whether or not they asked the upsell question. And unsurprisingly, the people who had the highest rate of upsells were the ones who were asking for it more often. It's this kind of revolutionary thinking that we bring to companies of all sizes. And I say that, tongue in cheek, but the reality is that most companies aren't looking. Even if they know they should, they don't know the tools to use. And the fact that we were able to go in, put this into place so quickly, and see such an immediate impact to say, you have to teach Jane to ask this at the end of every order because she's only asking it at the end of 30% of orders right now, was absolutely huge for this company.
So do you think, Sean, based on the feedback we got last time about, tell me more about internal benchmarking, tell me more about how I can do this. I don't know. I think, again, we've kind of given a lot of thought sparks here. We've kind of given a lot of thought starters that our listeners can use. Is there anything else we want to give them before we get into the challenge here? I mean, to me, again, it comes down to the simple, basic question of, is there an area of our business that we should be tracking where we could do better or we could improve? And maybe better or improve is not the right word, but just, what are the distinctions or the commonalities we should be trying to learn from where this has a direct impact on our bottom line? And I guess, looking at the less than obvious places sometimes is a hard thing to do, but it's kind of where a lot of these great insights come from, if that makes sense.
I think that's bang on. What I want to add to this is I'll go back to my days of doing mixed martial arts competitions and full contact fighting. And I remember I was doing something wrong and I was consistently getting kicked in the ribs, and it was not very fun. And my coach would say, Sean, you have to do this differently. I'd say, I know. And he'd kick me again and say, well, obviously you don't know because I was just able to get you again. And I think about this a lot because we're in companies a lot and we say, you guys really should be doing X. And they say, yeah, I know. But they're not doing it. Knowing what you need to do and actually doing it are worlds apart. And, I think it's what we talked about last time. Find the simplest way to do it and start doing it. Because the minute that you actually start making these changes, you start to see incredible results. So, if we go in and say, look, all of your salespeople need to ask for a referral at least 3 times a month, and you say, yeah, I know, that's obvious, but we look and see that it's not happening, it doesn't matter how obvious it seems to you. You don't get extra points. You don't get to write on your check an extra 0 because you said, I know I should have done this. You actually have to do it. And having the tools in place to let you know where and how is just as effective as that kick in the ribs was to me to really point out the difference between knowing and doing.
Well, I'm not going to kick you in the ribs. Do you want to issue the challenge today?
I did the last one, Noah. This one's all on you.
Oh, well, the pressure's on. Well, I'm going back to exactly what I said last time, right? Pick an area of your business. Pick an area where you could implement some sort of internal benchmarking. Think about the examples shared in this episode and the last episode, and then think about what you can start doing right now, right? Don't wait for the right tools, the right software. Don't spend time trying to figure it out. Just pick something and ask yourself, what's the most simple piece of data that would help me learn a little bit more about my business, about this specific area, and then how can I use that information to get better? That's my challenge. Get on it. Do it. Anything you want to add to that?
I think that's a great challenge. Find the data, know how you're going to use it, and start measuring. Right? It couldn't be easier if you have any salespeople in your organization. We've talked about this in the past month with our referrals discussions, with our internal benchmarking. Just get referrals in place. Say it's now your job to ask for 3 referrals a month. Here's how you're going to prove to me that you've done that. And I want you handing these in, or I want you recording this so that at the end of every month I can check and fire anyone who hasn't got their 3 referrals in this month.
And so there's a benchmark, right? So if we see that sales rep Joe gets 19 referrals over the course of the next 6 months or the past 6 months, and we see the other 3 guys, Steve, Mike, and John, only got 2 or 3, we've now got the data to show us that the reason he got so many referrals was because he actually did the work. He actually asked for them. We got the data to back it up. And that's the type of thing that you can use to internal benchmark. Now we've got a data point. Now we've got somewhat of a process. And now we've got an ability to bring people up to that same level just by making them follow that process. So, Sean, I think that's all I got. Last words from you before I wrap this up?
I think that covers it well. Go forth and measure.
Go forth and measure. You heard the man, and he is a brain surgeon. So listen, folks, feel free. Keep the comments coming. Keep the requests coming. If there's topics you want us to go deeper on, if you still want more on this topic, keep those comments coming. And again, if you have questions, as I've mentioned many times before, we do answer them. And so I'll answer them via email. We will respond to you. So reach out off my website, noahfleming.com. Hit the contact button. If you've got questions, something didn't make sense, or you just want to send your complaints, that's fine too. We pass off those to somebody else. But that's all we've got for you for today, folks. Feel free, pass the podcast on to your friends, your colleagues, your peers, your coworkers. Leave a review on iTunes, and we'll catch you next week. Ciao, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.